Welcome to the Extraordinary Podcast, where we identify God's uncommon work in common life. Recognizing God's work requires intentionality, but articulating it motivates and inspires. Don't forget to subscribe and never miss an episode. In today's episode, I have a conversation with Kevin Traxler, where he shares about his life, the obstacles, the difficulties that he's encountered, but how God has seen him through and how God has helped him see his worth as an individual and how God can use him in this life. So let's get into the conversation with Kevin. Kevin, thank you for being a guest on our podcast today. We appreciate you taking the time to share with us your story and just how God has worked in your life. Now, as we begin, can you share a little bit about some of your passions or hobbies, things that are interest to you?
My hobbies, those are easy. Exercise, lifting in particular, or boxing. Used to be a run, but then I screwed my leg up, so that's out of the question. My passions are typically I like to be busy. I like to work. I mean, it's the reason I volunteer for the church. Strike with case is kind of taking some of that away from me because I have no reason to get up early in the morning and get moving. So I like working. I do small projects at home. I have my guinea pigs, which are another passion because after I got them, I baby them. I make sure I have no veterinarian, so I gotta make sure if I'm sick, I don't even so much hold them so I don't hurt them.
What are their names?
Peter and Edmund. They're about the size of a large sweet potato each.
So if this Chronicles of Narnia inspiration here?
Exactly. Actually, yes, that was the reason I did it.
So good. That's fun. That's fun. Well, one of the questions that I'm intrigued to know about you is you spent time, your dad was a pastor for a period.
6 years.
What was life like as a pastor's kid? What are the things you liked, things you didn't like?
I was between the ages of 6 and 12, so I was having Asperger's. It meant my mental state was a few years behind. If I was 6, it would have been like being 3. I can't really remember reading much other than the fact that my parents had to wrangle me a lot, and regrettably, I would sleep a lot during church. I'd just roll on the pew, pass out, and I was a pain in the butt. I'll be straight with you. So I really don't remember a lot being that, but like kids ministry during the week, stuff like that. I got to help my dad out with my brother set things up for Sunday service or for what we called CLC. I forget what that stands for. But it was basically kids ministry back then. Mm-hmm. You got to figure this was early 2000s, late 90s or whatever. I got to see it before it actually happens, how stuff was set up. For me, it was fun. Like yeah, that's how it works. Other than being a regular kid with a mental illness, if you want to talk about regular, sorry I couldn't help that one. It was just a little different. Because mainly I hung around adults because I was a loner kid. And that was specifically by choice because of my Asperger's. So wasn't really much different than regular life, other than the fact that your dad's a pastor and you see a lot of the Christian realm.
Yeah, and I think you bring an interesting point that you get a sneak peek before the other kids or other people for how a ministry is set up, and churches, the buildings are pretty unique buildings that most of society aren't like church buildings, and so I know my boys enjoy kind of running around,
really?
And just being able to enjoy the building in a way that is kind of home to them. So that's fun. That's fun.
That was the same way with me, me, my brother and sister. More my sister because she was more the spiritual one of the three of us. My brother was a renegade. I was the loner. My sister was. She was the pious one. I think if I'm using that word correctly, she was more connected with God. Mm-hmm. She was acting like she was in her 20s when she was in her early teens.
And now she's married to a pastor.
Yeah, it took him a while, but yeah, now he is. From what it sounds like, it's actually he's doing successful.
Yeah. So that's good. Thank you for sharing that. Kind of switching gears a little bit. Your parents eventually separated and went through a divorce, which
in that order actually,
which was very hard for you. There were a lot of things that were difficult for you, and I'm probably still are. Divorce can cause pain in many ways.
It still does to this day. I won't hide that one bit.
But one of the things I want to explore a little bit is how has God or is God helping you get through?
Excuse me. He helped get me through by one. It didn't help that the very year my parents split, my grandpa died, so that made things even worse that year. That was 2002. Who he was actually my hero. So, but the divorce itself, I had issues with my father, who as a little kid I was scared of. I was as timid as a puppy. So, nothing my dad did. It's just his demeanor is still the same person he was 20 years ago.
And you have a good relationship with your dad now.
We actually went through a rocky situation with him where it got ugly, and this is in the last 6 years. And now it's actually probably better than it's been because now there is no surprises, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I know the dark side of him. He knows the full well screwed up side of me, aside from raising me.
But as I said, this.
But it's part of the best. It's part of the best outcome for a relationship because now I'm honest with him. I show no transparency. I show full transparency. I'm like, no transparency? Sorry.
So that's one of the ways that God has helped you get through this. You had maybe some rocky times with your dad, but in general, you're able to be fully transparent with him.
As of now, yes. Back then, I looked at him I wanted to be my dad at one point because I thought he was a person that was tough. He could take, and I'm not talking about just physically tough. He was, but he is still he could get yelled at and sit there with a blank face, like okay. And he had to deal with that as a pastor, someone in your position. I can imagine you've dealt with that too, but I don't know. I'm just speculating. I wanted to be him because he was smart. He could take the mental blows, and here I am with a mental illness that caused me to have a short fuse. So I literally tried to be him at one point, but now God has used my dad. Even despite the divorce one, I didn't like him at one point. I did hate him. He rebuilt my relationship during that divorce. Some other stuff I'm not going to mention at this moment. In all that chaos, I lost a relationship with my dad, and even to where I tried to commit suicide at one point at 13 years old. And now he blessed me by getting me out of my mom's house and living with my dad, and I actually started to grow up then. See the darker side of life, see how I handle it. He mentored me, he was the parental mentor, if you want to say it, however you would describe it, I don't know.
So one thing that's come to mind, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it sounds like even as difficult as the divorce was for you, one of the things that you have grown out of this is you have come to understand and accept who you are and figure out how you can serve God in that capacity. And
he still, out of all this divorce, one it's also I've dealt with. I've only had a few cases. First time was I was about 17 in high school. One kid was blaming himself for the divorce. I was being as blunt as a sledgehammer with him. I was not pulling my punches, but at the end of it, because he was blaming himself, I'm like, oh really? How? That kind of approach. But at the end of it, I had already suffered through it. My parents were already divorced by that point, so I was able to help someone else out. I have seen people who are, whether in their adulthood, their parents are divorced. I'm like, I can reach out to them. I witnessed it as a kid. Adults, I would assume it's not as severe because you're not living with your parents. You just readily you're on the sidelines.
I would agree with that. I was an adult when my parents separated and got divorced, and that was a difficult situation for me and my siblings who are older than I am. And it's made me realize if it was that difficult for me, how much more difficult it is for those who are still living at home. And so it gives me greater empathy for someone in your situation.
It screwed my brother and sister up a little bit as well. I was the worst cases because of my Asperger's.
Yeah, but God was able to see you through and help you get through it, but also thrive in positive ways. And so we're thankful for that.
Teachers as well, by the way, I forgot to mention that. Teachers and other faculty, like the lunch ladies, I remember this one lunch lady, I'll never forget her. She was kind of like the school mom, so to speak, Mrs. Vermillion. She always asked, "Hey, how's things going with you in this separation?" She'd just check on me, pull me aside every once in a while and ask me how it's going. So God blessed me with a lot of people that actually looked out after me, even at school, despite all the other crap I was dealing with.
Yeah, that's I think that's a powerful reminder. Even those who have minimal interaction can still have a positive impact on us. So you can impact people positively even if you just have a brief window of opportunity.
And I mean brief, like it lasted maybe 30 seconds a minute.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that I know about you is you are a hard worker. That if you have a task and you're given it, you're going to give it your all. Whether it's shoveling snow, whether it's whatever hobby you're doing, like you focus on it. Why is hard work important to you?
Well, the determination part, that's very simple. It has everything to do with my Asperger's, because do you know anything about it, by the way?
A little bit, but
okay.
Everyone's different.
All right. Well, basically the biggest thing is the word my mom likes to use a lot is perseverate. I can't get off of it. Okay, so that's whether it's a hobby or hard work. That's the word I can't stop. It could be with something stupid as a game on my phone. It was like, I want to get this done. It'll bug me if I don't get it. So, but the hard work, my dad instilled in me. He taught me that he did use the Bible in a lot of cases. You don't work, you don't eat. That was the biggest one. Mm-hmm. And then I've read Proverbs before. There's plenty of cases in there where people need to work, because that's, well, heck, Adam and Eve, they were working when they were in the garden, and that was paradise on earth. Mm-hmm. So my dad instilled into me a sense of work ethics and to give the best I have, not just work the hardest, but he's where I get it from. As a matter of fact, he's the reason I volunteer. The last churches I was at, I try to find ways to volunteer to help out. And he said, if you can, make it look the best. If you're not in a situation you can't, then do the best you can at the moment, even if it's not your best. Mm-hmm. So I get the work part from my dad, and after I worked at Weingart for a while, I did not like it there. I absolutely hated it, but I still gave it my best, despite the fact that I hated it. Mm-hmm. Because okay, this is my job, this is my responsibility. Don't pull corners. Don't make shortcuts. Mm-hmm. And again, I believe that was God's way of actually making me a better person, because in this day and age, you don't see it much, and now it's like I am grateful that I had that.
Yeah. Now, speaking of work, you are an employee of Case, and
I'm not a temp. To just clarify, I'm actually hired directly through there.
So, can you tell us about your journey with Case so far? Because you've technically about almost maybe a calendar year, for 12 months you've been employed at Case?
I was employed January 10th last year, 2022.
Okay, all right. So tell us about your employment history.
Okay, first off, I got fired from Weingart, and I was always trying to get hired through them. And when they called me like 2 weeks after I get fired, I'm like, wait, is this real? And yes, they were saying like, yeah, this is real. I'm like, no, please tell me this is not a joke. So it started off even in a comical, unbelievable way, because here's one of the best jobs in town. I'm actually landing it. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. Then I get there. I've never worked in an auto factory whatsoever. I was hanging satellite mounts when I was at Weingart, so big, easy stuff. You just put on the hook. I actually assembled stuff on tractors, backhoes, if anyone can look that up, or forklifts. I was probably in 5 different areas in the 4 months I was there. I learned a lot. It was a headache, I'll be honest with you. But I met plenty of people there. Some people didn't like me just because it was their case. So, most people, we got along. We goofed around each other, pranked each other, like, really, pal? Come on. But it was a good experience there. The learning experience there was different than anything I've ever been in, because I've been in 2 shops before that. One shop was a privately owned shop, and then you got Weingart, which is still privately owned, but still it's kind of its own. You know what I mean?
It's a bigger company, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you worked there for 4 months, and then what happened?
I went on strike.
Yeah.
May 2nd of 2022, we walked out. Over 400 of us.
And for essentially 9 months.
Yeah, because we left again, because when we go back, it'll be on the 30th of this month. So
And so we're recording this.
it's January. Right now, it's January 23rd, and we're going back on the 30th of 2023. So yeah, we've been by the time we go back, it'll have been a solid 9 months. Yeah. I guess you could say it was a birthing period to make a joke out of it.
So it was a long time where you were on strike after only working there for 4 months.
I was on strike twice as long as I was working that plant.
So how has God provided for you during this strike period?
Once a week, I was making as much money as I was making on a 50-hour work week at Weingard, so about $400.
So you were still getting financial support that was at least
through the union. Actually, we do our picket thing and we get paid. We get paid for it because I'm in a financial situation. Excuse me. I've lived off of less than $400 before, and also for a time when we worked. Because at first we were only making $275. I was able to get a job at Casey's, and then after I got the job after we got the $400, I'm just like, I hate doing this guy working in the first place. I'm gone. Yeah. Essentially, there's a little bit more to it than I'm not going to discuss. So no, God's provided for me. He's also helped keep me from going completely stir crazy because also my landlord. Her name is Dawn. Her husband, who does the maintenance, is Mike. We've had some rocky situations just because you work with someone long enough, that's a situation. But they've given me work to do. I've got to help them out. Mike alone knew I was a hard worker, and he knew I wanted to do it right. I've probably worked on almost 10 apartments in the 9 months I've been there. Mm-hmm. And I've seen the worst side as far as evicting people, sadly enough, but I know why.
Yeah. So, but God has provided for you in different ways throughout this. The money from the union, work, odd and end jobs from your landlord, doing those types of things. But God has provided for you. Now, one thing I want to explore a little bit with you is your relationship with Jesus. Because you've talked to me before that you had some moments that you weren't really following Jesus, but you have come to Jesus and you've had different steps in your spiritual growth. Can you talk about when you came back to Jesus and when you became serious about following Jesus?
First off, I never stopped believing in Jesus. I stopped following him because I had my own anger issues. It was after my grandma died. A longer story I'm not going to get into, obviously. But God brought me back at a Christian camp. I didn't even take communion because I know that's going to be a slap in God's face if I'm not following him. One night I lose my temper, and my sister was the guardian angel he used. Again, she is very spiritual. She has a very close relationship with God. I could have picked my sister up and thrown her across the floor. I couldn't even get out of her grip. Mm-hmm. That's how strong God used her. And I was shaking and bawling my eyes out. I did not cry. You never saw me cry at that point in my life. I just refused to. You can say I've been limited on ever since. And it wasn't until after I got out of Weingard, so a little over a year now, I've worked on getting my relationship back, because I'll be straight with you. I was not a person who should be calling themselves a Christian when I was working at Weingard. I let my temper get the better of me. And the only thing I could do with that is tell people, don't do what I'm doing. I'm what you don't do. That's about the only use I had, was to help kill the weeds in other people's lives, so to speak, because I read that salt at one point was actually used to keep weeds from growing. And I've done that before, actually. That was about the only good use I was for at the time when I was working at Weingard. So I'm luckily, through my brother-in-law, we have a Bible plan to read the Bible in a year. I struggle with that just because I have a hard time reading in general. But I've had problems with other things that I've been struggling with for 20 years. And for the record, I'm going on 33. I'm 32 currently. 20 years is 2/3 of my life. So God has made it in me where I hate what I do, Versus when I actually didn't bother me that much. Like, oh, I know I shouldn't have done that. It hurts. Whooping. Now, it makes me sick. Spiritually sick.
So are you saying that God has given you a disgust for sin?
Yes.
That sometimes you still stumble, but now you're at a point where you say, man, I wish I wouldn't have done that.
I'm going to use an example for you. With cussing, most common thing in this world, okay? I don't even like cussing anymore. There are certain words I will use around people that are considered cuss words, but I know what their meaning is. And I only say it to a handful of people. But typically when people use certain cuss words, they're not using them for what they mean by definition. Mm-hmm. I don't like doing that anymore. It does bother me. There was only one this past Saturday. I was ill-tempered because of a lot of stress going on. I vented. It got out. I didn't like the fact that I did it. It just had to come out, though. It was like a assist that needed to be.
And I think that's a sign of spiritual maturity of when we do mess up, whatever that is, whether it's big or small, if we realize, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done that. Right. Now, if we mess up and don't care, we have
spiritually dead.
Yeah, spiritual apathy, and that's a dangerous place to be. And so another thing that comes to mind as you were talking is that you realized you came to a greater sense of self-worth, that Jesus can use me, that I am valuable or important or whatever that may be, because sometimes that's hard to recognize in our own lives.
It's hard to swallow.
That we can seem unworthy, and particularly when we think of our past mistakes. And so thank you for sharing that. And I kind of cut you off. Was there anything else you were wanting to share with
no,
that?
we much hit on the head, and that's another. Oh, you were saying our past mistakes. I listened to this one guy on YouTube. He kind of reminds me of you. He's a Hispanic fellow, very very nice. He gives it with he doesn't sugarcoat it, but he doesn't beat you over the head with this stuff. And I've bragged about you for that reason, because you don't hold back, but you're not thumping people's skull open with the Bible. This guy was actually how I learned. Besides just you, this guy actually did learn about blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. When you don't care about God, that means you are pretty much saying God means nothing. That is blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. That's what I was doing at one point, because I was walking away from Him deliberately, not just. Yeah, I went to church, but guess what? I wasn't a Christian. You can go to church and be something completely different. Mm-hmm. God actually helped use this guy on YouTube to help me understand. I thought just because I'm doing all these sins, I'm worthless. I'm bound for hell. So, and that was the biggest fear. At one point, it was making me sick this year. I'm like, what's going to happen to me when I die? What happens if I die tomorrow? I wasn't sure at one point. I still struggle with that, don't get me wrong, because that was only a month ago. But the fact that I do care is the first step I need. And this guy helped explain. This guy, I forget his name, but we can't have apathy. We can't have if we actually God is not done with me yet. Otherwise, I wouldn't care one bit. Basically, what he was getting at. If you still feel convicted, that's God's voice, by the way. Condemnation is the demonic voice, is the devil's voice. That's that was one thing he explained. So now I've been able to. That's one thing I also learned this year, how God's helped me understand stuff. Again, I don't like reading just because it makes me sleep. I'm not exaggerating. If it's condemnation, I know it's not God. If it's convicting me, making me feel guilty, but not making me feel like I'm worthless, then I know where it's coming from. Mm-hmm. God's helped me understand the difference between voices, His voice and sin.
I think that's a wise distinction that you've drawn there. But one of the things that I think you're highlighting is you don't have to have it all figured out before you can come to Jesus. Jesus wants you to come to Him with your mess, and He'll help you sort it out.
You don't go to a dentist. You don't get your teeth fixed, then go to a dentist. I actually heard that analogy. So you don't go to a doctor. Well, you go to a doctor to get well. That's it. You go to Jesus. I forget who it was that I heard this from. You go to Jesus, and then you get the rest and He sorts it out for you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a great reminder for us. A great challenge that Jesus will help us figure it out. So just come to him with your mess, and he will clean it up, and he will help you get to where you need to be. Well, Kevin, I appreciate you being on the podcast. I appreciate you sharing with us today and your transparency on your journey, the difficulties that you've encountered, but also the way that God has helped you through life circumstances and how his grace shines in your life.
So this is also coming from a person who deals with severe anxiety issues and anger issues. God still used me for that. So I just want to put that out there because I'm a mess even to this day. I'll be straight with you. But what did God do? Heck, what did God do? Jesus came down here and he helped. Well, heck, the last miracle he did was went before he died on the cross was he promised one of the other guys that they were going to be in paradise with him.
Yep.
So there's another miracle. It doesn't matter who you are. Mm-hmm. You can be a complete mess and Jesus ain't going to give up on you.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you. Thank you for your words. Thank you for just sharing your story. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this podcast. Be on the lookout for how God does uncommon work in common life. And please subscribe to never miss an episode.